Thank you, Pedro, and thank you, everyone. Welcome to this session on outcomes of accountability mechanisms co-created with children and community. This is the session 16, so may I ask probably Pedro to put the PowerPoint slide on and as while we are waiting for some other participants to join, may I ask you as a little warm up to put from where are you joining us today in the chat? So can you write like which is the country that you're based in? So this will give us a bit of a understanding about the level of participation that we could get. And in the meantime, I would like to offer a brief presentation. These sessions explore how accountability mechanisms can be co-created with children and communities in humanitarian settings. We have with us today four wonderful speakers who will share examples from South Sudan on designing safe survivor centered sexual exploitation and abuse reporting system in partnership with women-led organization. And from Burkina Faso, we have a presentation on co-developing an innovative child-friendly consultation tool, game jams with children themselves. So I will not be long and alone in this session. I will ask to go to the next session where we can, to the next slide, sorry, where you can start to see who will be like the participants, the speakers, the protagonists of this session. I will be a facilitator. I'm Domenico di Nuzzo, and I am the global CP and PSS lead from Right to Play, and I will be co-facilitating this session with Manami.
Hello, everyone. I'm Manami Kawamoto, and I'm program specialist in the Alliance Secretariat. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Manami. May I ask then, like Matilda?
Good afternoon, good morning. Sorry, we're still working on the camera, but I am Matildah Musumba. I'm the Protection from Sexual Exploitation and Abuse specialist with UNICEF here in South Sudan.
Thank you, Matilda. And Yika?
Yeah, good afternoon or good morning. My name is Yika Marina Mogga. I work as the GBV manager for Women for Justice and Equality, a women-led organization in partnership with UNICEF, based here in South Sudan.
Thank you, Yika. And I see that following my cameras on the Zoom window, please, Sophie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Sophie Mareschal. I work for Terre des Hommes as a global meal advisor in the Quality and Accountability Unit, and I will be presenting on behalf of our team in Burkina Faso today.
Thank you, Sophie. And last but not least, Capucine.
Hi everyone, I'm Capucine Tibit. I work for Grand Truth Solution as a program coordinator.
And that's all for today. This is what you will hear from us. And thank you for the people who are answering in the chat. I see that we have a lot of representation coming from different countries, from Canada to Albania to Brazil. That's great. Please continue to tell us about from where are you joining. Thank you, Tendai. I see you coming from Kenya. And the next slide, because we have another question for you. We would like to this session to be a bit participatory. We want to have a sort of temperature check with a Zoom poll. So as we say, we are talking about accountability mechanisms who are co-created in this session. And we have some questions for you who are attending here as a participant. So there will be a Zoom poll that will be started soon. You can answer honestly. We will not collect any sensitive data. It's just to give us a bit of a sense of what is like exactly the temperature, the feelings, the topics, the level of interest in the session. Plus, be aware that some of those points will also be touched during the two presentation that we are going to have after that. But please vote, and you can, 3 questions. There are multiple options. You can vote and you can submit your answer. So the first one is at what stage do you engage and consult children communities? So the second question is which of these are the pillars of accountability to affected population, AAP, including children? And again, is a multiple choice. And another one, the last one is which of the following communication channels do children often prefer to use to share their feedback on humanitarian action? So you can submit. In the meantime, I see people coming from Switzerland, from Burkina Faso as well. We have colleagues from Chad. Thank you for giving us this geographical footprint of the participation in this session. And without taking further time, I will hand over to the first session, the first presentation. Can we move the slide? Thank you. So, as you saw, this is a session that comes to us from Tadezom and Ground Truth Solution. So, we will be sharing the co-development process of an innovative child-friendly consultation tool, game jams with children themselves in Burkina Faso. And I will hand over to Sophie and Capucine that will guide us through this learning journey. Over.
Yeah, thank you, Domenico, and hi again, everyone. If you can go to the next slide, I would like to start by saying a word about the drawing that you see on the screen. It shows a community in Burkina Faso where humanitarian aid is delivered, and this is actually a puzzle that children put together as they played and shared their view on humanitarian aid during the co-creation process. And it's part of the methodology that we are going to present just now. So if we can go to the next slide. So the starting point, next slide for this work was a study on children's perception of aid, which confirmed that children are rarely consulted by humanitarian actors, even though they make up more than half of the population in the country, and they are often the most affected by crisis. But they experience humanitarian aid very directly. They see what's happening, whether it's at distribution sites, through their involvement in projects, by helping out at home, observing their surroundings, their community, or simply listening to adults. And they don't just observe, they form also sharp and critical opinions. Some of them in the study said that because they are just children, their voices don't count. They feel that they are not really allowed or even entitled to take part or share what they think. This feeling is perhaps one of the biggest barriers to participation, and it's reinforced by other challenges that we know, that lack of clear, accessible information, limited spaces where they can speak safely, cultural norms, power imbalances, and others. So next slide. Following this study, we decided to engage in a project to create a tool that would make it easier to consult children on the topic of accountability, which we know can be very complex and sensitive. And we know also that humanitarians often feel unsure how to approach this subject with children. So at TDH, we had already developed some activity guides using illustrated cards, but we wanted to go further, try out more accessible, more motivating, even playful approaches while keeping it safe. And we really wanted to challenge our adulthood, our adult perspectives, better minimize biases, avoid tokenism. We really wanted to engage in a process where children would feel comfortable to speak honestly about potentially difficult topics. So we had this idea of creating a game to support these conversations, but we were a bit unsure actually. Can we really play when talking about such serious topics? Is it possible? Is it even appropriate? So I'd like now to give the floor to Capucine from Ground Truth Solution, and she will explain how the methodology was developed and how we address those questions with the children. Yes, Capucine, you can go ahead and we can go next slide.
Maybe the next slide, the one even after that, please. So let me tell you a bit about the co-creation process and how we developed this toolkit and especially this game. So just as a disclaimer, even if what we're going to present today might seem very linear, it was far from it, and actually it was a very iterative process, and we really didn't have a clear vision of what the final toolkit would look like until the end of a project. So we co-created the game with nearly 80 children in Tougan, Waiguya, and Ouagadougou. And it was a sequential approach, so we started in one location, and then we would move to the next, and the next group of children could build on what the previous one had done. And as Sophie mentioned, a key priority for us was that it would not be tokenistic participation, and so we spent a lot of time before actually engaging in the co-creation process to build children's capacity to truly understand the project and what it means to participate in it. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see our project timeline. I won't go too much into detail, but it's just to show you that it took quite a long time. It took us a year to come up with the toolkit. And there was many different aspects to it, training facilitators, building the capacity of children, then the game, and then piloting it, testing it, refining it. So it was quite a long process with many steps. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see our co-creation journey in Ouagadougou, which was more or less reproduced then in Tougan and Waiguya. And so what we want to emphasize is you can see there's 5 steps before the game jam, and those steps, they were all about explaining to children what we're trying to do and building their capacity. So we started with an introduction with their parents, and then we moved on to a full session on participation, the right to participate. And then we moved on to understanding better humanitarian work through notably a short field work activity where children could interview humanitarian workers and then analyze what they said. And it's only after all of this that we moved on to the week of game jam. And all of this was really so children could first to also build group cohesion, that children felt confident in their project and really understood its goals. So now let me move on to the next slide to talk a bit about the game jams. So the game jam happened over a week. And so for game jam is a methodology where people are meant to come together to create a game that fits a specific objective. And in our case, the objective was expressing oneself about the quality of humanitarian assistance. So the way we proceeded is the first 2 days, we really focused just on playing and understanding what's a game, how you create a game, what are different possibilities of games and dynamic between players, and what children actually like. And then the following 2 days, we had the prototype children had built, and this time we refocused on our specific thematic of accountability and the consultative dimension. So for instance, children identified key questions they would ask other children to understand their perspective of assistance and integrated it into their prototype. And then the final day, because children had been working in different groups, we kind of regrouped all the ideas together and worked on finalizing one final version. Next slide, please. So at the end of the week in the process in Ouagadougou, we kept going in Tougan and Waiguya, and the children there got to kind of do the same process and refine the original game. And just to share with you some interesting feedback that they put forward and that led the game to change quite a bit. So one feedback was that we needed to shift a bit away from the playing dynamics because children felt it was like a serious topic and that it needed to be introduced properly. They also wanted to avoid the competitive aspect of the initial games because they thought that this was pushing children to lie during the game so they could win because it was a game. Another interesting feedback they gave us was that they wanted to avoid the negative aspect of a game. So for instance, going backward or having animals that are a bit scary, because they wanted to really keep a positive dimension to the game because of its heavy thematic in the first place. I'll hand over back to Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you. We can go to the next slide, please. And here you can see a photo of a game board created by the children themselves. We then worked with an illustrator to finalize the board design based on the children's drawing and the colors they had used. We also went through a feedback round to make sure that both the content and style matched what the children had in mind. And as they recommended, as Capucine mentioned, the game is designed as a collective experience with shared passages like crossing a river, encountering animals, or resting in the shade of a tree, where the children stop to reflect and discuss the questions together before moving forward as a group. So along the way, they collect puzzle pieces that form an image of their community, the ones that we saw in the beginning, with scenes of cross-sector humanitarian action. And in the next slide, we can see some sample of the game cards. There are 8 main themes with 1 or 2 questions per theme. The questions follow a gradual progression, first identifying humanitarian intervention in the community and what are the actors, then exploring positive and less positive aspects the children may have observed, followed by topics like prioritization of needs, selection of beneficiaries, the behavior of humanitarian staff, children's participation in projects, and their sense of safety. All the questions were tested, prioritized, and rephrased by the children themselves in a language that they understand better and makes sense to them. Next slide. On the screen, you can see an overview of the game rules. So in the next slide, the board, the card, the rules, and the facilitator guide that constitute what we call the consultative pack. All available on TDH website, along with a document summarizing the lessons learned from the process. And there is also a collaborative pack that includes materials from the session on participation, humanitarian aid and accountability, the facilitator guides, the ethical protocol, and training support tools. So we could share it upon request too. And what about the outcomes, actually? We would like to now to show you a short video that was prepared by Terre des Hommes team in Burkina Faso, so that we can hear directly from the children and a colleague how they experience the process and what it meant for them. So the children speak in their language, so Moré, so there will be subtitle in English. And for French and Spanish speaker, you will find the transcripts posted in the chat. So let's go. Let's hear them.
Dara sen ton sin tawa on bangat taba ton pi dera ton pi group number yibu on pi group number yibu za ton man zewa za ton la taba nyak zel ton parata soba basni na ton lix ton data soba sa onta baki ton man de group ton man premier group mani ta man zewa deuxième group zingeti Senta bili se busy bébé question non business bébé bili senta beni ba pose fo question feleki deuxième groupe mizingeti deuxième groupe le mandito après ton atava on mange règle number dans respect number non zero ton na tava groupe man zero ya ko somo are malade ya ko pas somo base man zero somo quel man zero halite Zo yino zapta pezin di Yika ni la. Wo mataba lara glami zo yesoma. Zo to be mom no. Et never jibin pa nam staba. Pa zaptaba. Ke lus ne taba. Zo yino. Si mam no ga ya Qu'est-ce qu'on pose les ignorants parce que à compte de ton yam là, compte de ton bangare là, ça va entendre as humanitaire zoo. C'est un imam, humanitaire namba, balik de combat yam tas, la bayal man tunda, la bayal songa.
Bikira yamya ni kasma yamba ni ho kasma to inda to manyande jibiga parate to manyande yeni ni alaba sindike kumbi yamna takasiya ya wande mandrsiya
basi sumundi kwa maya takasiya songa ba foto ndako ko bute ile parate suma sosne bana kuba bana sindate ya lo ko autant qu'on est la mode en son parate il faut sosne berga ta ayemi to so ya nya kare to fa ya lo mano ko bari kira ko mata be so mo so sene ba bang ni daga fa yuaiga ya lo mane Rozo wa kita mtu mzukuru balmon Bani combien vous de table. Le projet quand il s'arrête c'est qui tente même tout et mzugura. Si ne parle combien le pour tout le femme bio que la soanta basse combien tout le monde va les pas tout taba. Ye mamna yida. Sans pipsine pas mamna. La basse ye mamna.
Beni mamu sentansi beni ba sempre question namba conta fiam de fam sanze fonda mi bumle nino fo bangada mi fonda para respect de fala namba for respect na kita am senyanida mpato ma muntira songa so am sempato ent bol kasmata tinata son
Sani mom yam tawas go me pa to science ba ba abari kun ko ko bita ba do mi le ba nan bang humanitaire mo ndati le ko yam tawas go abari ba bang humanitaire mo ndati.
Pendant le processus du projet ARP, j'ai pu observer beaucoup de changements au niveau des enfants qui ont participé. Ce changement se situe au niveau même de l'amélioration de la communication de ces enfants et l'amélioration aussi des interactions des enfants avec les humanitaires que nous sommes. Et ça brise les barrières pour que ces enfants-là puissent s'exprimer entre eux-mêmes d'abord, la solidarité qui est née entre ces enfants, l'intégration, l'acceptation entre eux-mêmes et les amitiés qui se sont créées entre eux. Et cela favorise davantage leur participation aux activités. Pour moi, le processus il est complet et je ne pense pas qu'il y ait un aspect à changer. Il faut méthodiquement suivre ce qui est planifié et on peut arriver au résultat escompté.
Comme man arboatonda ratame tuba pugutunda ni yamle go ben puwe talin mamu mina wa yiwatonda ben pugutonda bale talin bana wa yiwaton mamu mina en kento nora ponte na taba.
Merci projet ARP.
So thank you for everyone for your attention. I would like also to thank the children for their trust and their contribution, and also their team in Burkina Faso.
And thank you, Capucine and Sophie, on behalf, I think, of all the participants of the session. We have more than 80 participants, and the video was extremely powerful. I couldn't hold the smile in listening like the comments of the children. So I invite everyone to put your questions in the chat so that Sophie and Capucine can go through it and start to answer them, or maybe there will be a Q&A part at the end of the session as well. And thank you again, and I will now ask for the new presentation to get ready. We have Matildah and we have Yika. They will be presenting about designing a safe survivor-centered sexual exploitation and abuse, the SEA reporting system, in partnership with women-led organization. We move from Burkina Faso to the context of South Sudan, and I hand over to Matildah and Yika for this second part of this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. Please confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Another disclaimer is that our internet is unstable, so if it gets a bit too much, we'll just switch off the camera. But while it's cooperating with us, I'm happy to be here this afternoon together with my colleague Yika. I'm Matildah from UNICEF in South Sudan, and we are here to present some of the evidence that we did find through the study we were doing in terms of reviewing the SEA reporting practices, particularly in humanitarian contexts. And out of that evidence, the model that we have designed specifically for South Sudan, hoping that moving forward, this is the model that many of the humanitarian organizations will adopt, and putting particularly the affected populations, particularly women and girls, at the center when it comes to design or ensuring that the reporting channels, particularly for sexual exploitation and abuse, are accessible to the vulnerable groups, particularly women and girls. As we know, particularly in humanitarian context, there are many barriers that inhibit or stop people from reporting SEA. These include the harmful practices, harmful cultural and gender norms that exist, the lack of awareness, the fear of retaliation, and the distrust in the reporting systems that are in place. So with this study, it was to take an honest look at what we have as the channels that we design. Are they actually accessible and safe, particularly for women and girls? And in the South Sudan context, we found them not to be the case for various reasons, which we shall be sharing through the presentation. Next slide, please. And therefore, in terms of the evidence gathering, we took, next slide, we took, there were various activities that were undertaken to make sure that we get this evidence to help us in reshaping the kinds of reporting channels we have for sexual exploitation and abuse, particularly for South Sudan, but hoping that we have, it can really be replicated, and other countries and other humanitarian contexts can really benefit from it, because as we present some of the perceptions that were coming out, you'll realize that these are common perceptions, particularly in many humanitarian contexts. So we are hoping that the model is not just for South Sudan, but for other contexts also, that it can almost be applied, but it has, again, to be context specific. We went through various phases. We had country level consultations in terms of the data collections. And here I have to say that the women and girls were really at the center in terms of involving them, particularly in the planning phase and also in the data collection, making sure that they were at the center of it all, the analysis thereafter. And then with the evidence that was gathered, we again went back to the women and girls that were involved in this particular project to co-design the model together to ensure that it is safe and accessible. At the moment, we are at the implementation stage of the model. And this piloting is still ongoing. It has started and it has been ongoing for about 5 months now. And we hope that it will continue at least until end of the year, moving forward. And then out of this, we hope to gather all the lessons learned, although we are already gathering some lessons, and make sure that other contexts can also learn from this. And even though it was being led by UNICEF and our partner WOJE, that is the Women Justice and Equality Organization, it's really, this work was being done on behalf of the South Sudan coordination, PSCA coordination task force. So it is on behalf of also all the other agencies, UN and CSOs, that this particular pilot was being carried out. In terms of the next steps, now after we finish with the lessons learned, of course, there'll be a technical guidance that will be developed that will help shape globally in terms of the programming and the modeling of SCA reporting channels, both that put particularly the affected populations at the center. I'll hand over to my colleague Yika to bring out some of the perceptions that we gathered as we were conducting the review of the reporting channels for SCA. Yika. Next slide, please.
Nice. Good afternoon, everyone. So just as we go through, we can see on our screens the contextual challenges. One of it is the culture norms, some of the practices that are in the community, like child marriage, they normalize SCA because in our context, most of the children are married off at a really young age. So most of the girls may fear to report to their families that maybe someone is harassing them because of fear that they would be married off to that particular person. Because if we look at SCA, it's the humanitarian workers. So in the community, they have the perception of humanitarian workers have a lot of money, so they would actually just force the victim to be married off to the perpetrator. So that is why we found out that most of them don't report. And then if we look at economic dependency, most of the victims, they look at SIA as not as a form of harassment or exploitative because it's a gain for them. In other words, if you have someone in the humanitarian work, for example, in the nutrition side, who will be giving you more food ratios or giving you more favors, and then in return, maybe you're giving in your body. So they don't see it as a form of harassment, and some of them see it as a form of maybe work and provision for their families. And of course, in our communities, as I said before, the social stigma, in case you report, they have this fear of the whole community may know what I'm going through and I'll be isolated and all that comes with it. And if we look at limited protection, most of the organizations, we really don't have the secure environment or the safe houses to keep the victims or the survivors in these places. And it's really difficult for us to protect them at times. And then accessibility, South Sudan generally, most of the current organizations are quite far from the reach out areas of the women and girls, and they don't have that availability to maybe pick up a phone call and call an organization in case they need help. And also with the service gaps, we find most of the organizations are on and off. And so the sustainability bit of it, it's really hard. So most times the victims don't get the help. Yeah. Next slide. So in the next slide, we are looking at the community perceptions of mechanisms, because we went ahead and asked them what they perceive to be the safe format in which they would prefer to report. So the women and girls came up with some of the suggestions is that they look at the community leaders, but then they still have a question mark on the community leaders, because In South Sudan, most of the community leaders are all men. So they feel like even if they are to report to the men leaders, they will be influenced by the powerful actors who may have money and they will not be heard. And also when you look at the GBV service providers, they suggested it because they feel like safe with the service providers, but then also limited accessibility. Most of the service providers are far away from the women and girls in the communities. And then they also have fear that it could be the service providers could have influence or they could have connection with the perpetrators. Next. Next slide. For the health providers, the women and girls suggested the health providers because they may need help in case maybe they are hurt and they may need physical cleaning or something, but then they are concerned with the costs and what comes about it, because here in South Sudan, in case you are harassed or maybe something happens to you, there are many forms they usually ask before they give you the help. Yeah, and then for the police, was something that most of the women do not agree with because they see the police as corrupt, they will accept the bribes, and it's not safe for them. Yeah. And then also when you go to the next slide, when they look at the UN or NGOs that they'll be able to protect their staff, they will not listen to them, but they'll rather choose maybe to relocate their staff to safer places and they will not get the help they need. And then when it came to the protection help desk, most of the women have no knowledge about the protection help desks, and there are quite few within here, South Sudan. And then also the accessibility to this help desk is really difficult for the women. And they have fear that the staff who are working at the help desk could not be having an open heart or maybe understanding to them. So they were quite hesitant on the protection help desk. But then on the next slide, the women really preferred the women leaders or the women-led organizations, and it is where they feel more safer, and it would be safe for them to report to the women leaders because the women leaders are always with them in the communities, and the women leaders understand them because in a sense of they're also women, they know what may be the harassment they have ever gone through. And also the women-led organizations because they're at the forefront fighting for them. So most of the women and girls preferred that they would rather report to the women leaders or the women-led organizations because they feel safer. Yeah. The next slide. We look at the general perceptions. Most of the women and girls, they prefer the face-to-face reporting through the trusted persons, especially the women leaders. And because the women also and the girls, they encourage us that in case we have trainings for maybe our staff on how to report and how to handle the SCA cases, they really encouraged us to train the women leaders because they are looking at the fact that the project may come to an end. So who else will be there and help them or support them? And then also most of the formal mechanisms that we have in place as NGOs, generally the community doesn't have trust in those forms like the help desk, the hotlines, the police, and SCA is not known in the community. Most of the people know GBV, but SCA was very new to the women and girls, and it took us really a long time to explain to them what it means and the dangers that surround it. I'll call in Matildah.
Okay, so based on all these perceptions, we also got very clear, next slide, very clear recommendations on what the reporting lines and moving forward, particularly on SCA, how we need to move forward. The next slide. So it revolves around making sure that our awareness, the PSCA awareness efforts are enhanced, and particularly focusing on the reporting channels, because that is one weak area. We found that there could be some little knowledge, but there wasn't enough on the reporting channels where they need to go to, and particularly now, not so much on the usual common reported channels of GBV as such, but making sure that we are informing the communities and building the awareness on what SEA is, their rights to report, and where to report. Issues of confidentiality need to be further strengthened for all of us, for all actors in this particular area, because that is a perception that is unfortunately still very strong with the community members, particularly girls and women, that the information that they share for the few that do report, that it is not handled confidentially. So that fear is still strong, and we need to work on strengthening this particular area. We also need to work on offering anonymous options, and find ways of making the anonymous reports count and being acted upon and action taken, because of as we continue to reduce the stigma that or the fear that might be around judgment or retaliation. There's no two-way about it in terms of, if we're going to really be meaningful about having accessible channels, we need to remove we need to look at the illiteracy levels within our context and make sure that the reporting channels are actually suitable for communities that are still illiterate and have technological and logistical barriers. These have to be addressed. Trusted community actors still come out strongly as a point of reporting, and therefore as organizations we need to work on building these community actors that are still trusted and are models as far as making sure that they are able to then receive disclosures and handle them in the manner that and with the principles that we need adhered to. And then lastly, making sure that with the reports that we are getting timely and swift action, because there seems to be still that disconnect in terms of the few that are reported and the action and the time that it takes to actually receive the action taken. So based on these recommendations, next slides, we went into developing this model, and the model is not new, really. It is just something that we've been, maybe some have been working on it, but we need to make sure that A, we are prioritizing it, B, we are strengthening where there are gaps, and making sure that all understand and that it is accessible to as many people as possible. So we worked with the women and girls in the particular locations that we were working on to prioritize the face-to-face reporting, and this included working with case workers and particularly in the safe spaces to make sure that they're able to receive the SCA disclosures in the right manner and follow the right path as far as referrals are concerned. We are also working, as I said, this is a work in progress. We're still working on the challenges that are still coming up, but particularly addressing the issues around language and technology barriers, making sure that messaging, particularly on the awareness, is in the right language and is not only on the common channels or on that the channels that we use to send this message is as reachable as possible. Next slide. And therefore, for us, we are making sure that we are really building the capacity of not only the focal points, and for the focal points, we have the GPV and the case workers on the ground that we're working on. We're also working on making sure the referral process is known to all, and adhered to. And then lastly, investing on community awareness and engagement. Just if I can go briefly into the three components, next slide, particularly on the reporting channels and the focal points, is making sure that, as I said, we're working here in South Sudan with the GBV caseworkers that are on the ground. And also for UNICEF, we tapped onto the nutrition assistants and volunteers that we work with in one particular location, because we saw this as a group that can also be utilized when it comes to reporting, because they're already interfacing with the communities, and most importantly, they are also trusted. Next was also to invest on the referral pathways and making sure that these the reporting channels, the referral pathways that are very clear to all. And so the structure that we have in place is that, next slide, please, is for the focal points. When they receive any SCA disclosures, these are reported immediately to UNICEF, and they don't have to be UNICEF connected reports. So once UNICEF receives them, then we are able to channel them to the right organizations, because as I said, this is an interagency effort. And within South Sudan, we have a very clear standard operating procedures of making sure that the reports get to the right organization to take action. So referral pathways was key, and making sure that all understand. And then also investing on capacity building for the GBV caseworkers and the nutrition volunteers and assistants, building their capacity around SCA disclosures for them to understand the mandatory reporting obligations, which differ from GBV, on psychological first aid, on how to communicate, particularly with children and caregivers, when it comes to sexual exploitation and abuse, and then also capacity building around safe and confidential referral of reports. And next slide. I had talked about the referral pathway that exists, and this is a process that we already have in place, and we have an SOP that guides us. So it's not only for UNICEF, but for all other partners, both CSOs and UN agencies. We have a very clear SOP that guides us in terms of when one receives a report, how is it to be referred, and that that pathway is followed. But most importantly, for our focal points to understand these points and making sure that the reports are handled confidentially and referred in time. And then as we conclude, last slide. There was also the investment around community, and there is also the investment around community engagement and awareness, making sure that the strategies as we continue implementing, we are learning the lessons and adopting as we go along. But key to this is making sure we are prioritizing the oral and visual methods, which were the most preferred methods as far as awareness is concerned, use of the local languages, and then leveraging on the face-to-face outreach that most actors have through radio particularly, which is one of the most reached in terms of reach to audience, is one of the most used channels. And making sure that in the messaging, we are addressing the issues around confidentiality, victims assistance, and child-sensitive mechanisms, making sure that this is some of the key areas that we are emphasizing with the community engagement and awareness that we are carrying out. And making sure that these are locally driven and ensuring that women and girls can receive, can report safely and receive protection and support when they. that is it from our side. I hope through the question and answer, we may be able to address maybe some of the lessons that we've learned so far and we continue to learn, and also the challenges given if we have more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matilda and Yika, for this very interesting presentation. And I think that it was a very needed topic. So we never talk enough about the reporting channels for SCA, and the case that you presented was great. In the chat about if you could share a link to the UNICEF study, if there is any documents, any material. So like, I don't know if you want to answer now and provide, or maybe like put the link in the chat.
So for the link to the study, I will share with the organizers, and then they would be able to share with the rest of the audience. But certainly this is a public document that we should be able to share. Thank you.
Thank you. And also, like, now I will pass by through the presentation from Sophie and Capucine, and I see that Nanasra put the like for the answer. So there are multiple questions, and thank you, Sophie, for starting answering in the chat with Yika. There is one question that comes through the Q&A session, which is the game jams methodology designed for a specific age group of children? Are we facilitating it for any children regardless of their age? And also, I will link the second question about, I will put them in the chat. How do you select children due to the fact that Burkina Faso is in emergencies with IDPs? Over to you.
Yes, so on the age, we worked with children from the age of 10, 12 until 17. And they all participated very well in the co-creation, the game jam process. With the final prototype of the game, what we noted is that younger children were more appealed by the design, by the drawings and the animals and so on, and they were super motivated. So if we think in terms of contextualizing for different group, the tool for different group age, we could look at the design, whether maybe for young people or older children, we shouldn't maybe change the design, and involve them actually in contextualizing, changing the drawings and the colors, and but also the questions. So the questions that we used were rephrased by the children, and even the youngest, they did understand well. But maybe with older children, we could explore more complex questions eventually, and more questions. What is important with children is that it shouldn't last too long also. So we had to prioritize and select, but in the beginning we had more questions. On the selection of the children, I partially answered in the chat. It's a good question. We were lucky that we had the game jams during the summer, and it was a real opportunity because the children were free, and the parents were even relieved to know that they were participating in this kind of activity with peers in a safe space, and they did know actually already the colleagues in Burkina Faso, so trust was there and they were reassured. Then the team did their best to compose groups that were balanced, gender, age, and also locality of origin. Some children were from the locality and others were displaced. Something that we would like to do better is like inclusion of children with disability. It was a bit of a challenge to include children with special needs, but we have a project now starting with humanitarian inclusion, and that's something we are going to look at now more in depth. Yes. So
I would say then, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
I'm done. I think that's the, yeah. we can
Oh,
explore another
thank
question.
you. Then we will wait probably annual meeting 2026 on the outcome of inclusion of children with disability on this project. Thank you. And before closing, I have a questions also like Matilda and Yika, if you can briefly tell us, I mean, your presentation was great on SCA, the role of women-led organizations, a lot of topics related also to gender-based violence programming. So, but I would say if there is any other positive outcomes related in child protection or other sectors that this community-owned SCA reporting model was able to bring. So,
So in terms of what, and related actually to what Sophie just spoke about, the issue of girls, because our main target as far as those that we were consulting was women and girls. The issue of girls with disabilities actually did come out as, even though we had not initially planned for it, but it did come out as a concern, an area that we needed to also make sure that they're included. And therefore, even though it wasn't part of the initial design, but we made sure, because this was actually a need that was coming out from the ground, and because they were already part of the safe space conversations and some of the focus group discussions that we had. Therefore, we had to also formulate a tool that now specifically looks at what are the unique challenges when it comes to particularly girls with disabilities. And that I would say was not initially planned for, but it also contributed because we already had this group in two of the locations where we were carrying out the pilot, being part of the conversation. So we got bonus points in that sense. And bringing in the voices of girls with disabilities onto the table, and making sure that also as we move forward with the model that has been designed, that this particular area is looked at specifically, be it also with the capacity building that we are conducting for the GBV case workers and the nutrition workers, making sure that we also build their capacity to look at the issue of disability and the inclusion. And then also, maybe if we have half a minute, I would ask my colleague Yika to just bring out some of the challenges and some of the lessons that we've learned so far, or we are continuing to learn.
Okay, for some of the lessons that we have learned is that SCA is not known in the community, and it's not looked as a form of harassment, because it's a win-win situation, because you're gaining something and maybe giving out something. And that is how the community, the women and girls, were perceiving it. And for us to come in and tell them, no, it's actually something wrong to you, it was a shock to them. And one thing we also learned is that most of the women and girls trust women-led organizations and prefer that women-led organizations or women leaders work with them. So this also made us to learn that it's good for us to work closely with the women leaders time to time, engage them in our training, so that in case we are not there, the women leaders or the leaders of the adolescent girls are able to fill up the gap when an organization is not existent in that particular community. And then some of the challenges we had was that most of the community different activities, so that the whole community would really understand that. Yeah.
thank you, Matilda,
Thank you.
and thank you, Yika, for your answer. So, well, time is passing. We could stay hours to talk on these two amazing experiences. I would like to officially thank TDH, Sophie, and Capucine with your presentation. This game is an effective collaborative tool for addressing the subject of accountability with children, which is definitely an area that as a sector we need to learn more and more. And also, I would like to thank Matilda and Yika because these locally driven, community-led SCA reporting mechanisms definitely strengthen the trust, the accessibility, and also, as we say, the survivor-centered response. We need to ensure that women and girls can report safely and receive protection and support. It's never enough the effort that we are putting, and the journey is still long. Before closing, I would like to hand over to Manami and on the topic of accountability. But thank you all, Sophie, Capucine, Matilda, and Yika. And over to you, Manami.
Thank you. Because we are hitting at the top of the hour, I'm putting the link to the Alliance Accountability to Children initiative, as well as the contact that you can reach out to if you want to know more about the Alliance work on the accountability to children. And there's an extended mailing list that you can sign up. So please feel free to reach out to the contact address I shared in the chat. Thank you all. And the next session, yes. Yes, we are going for a 30 minutes break, and the next session starts at 2:30 in Central European time. Thank you.
And a special thank you to Manami, Kira, and Pedro for the amazing technical support, the translation during the video, the slides, and all the producing team of this session. And thank you also again to all the four panelists. Have a nice continuation of the day.